Hello, this is the History for All Ages channel, and today we are going to be looking at the medical renaissance in England between 1500 and 1700. The first thing we are going to look at today is the changes and continuity in regard to the treatment of disease and illness. There was little actual change in the way physicians treated disease and illness. The use of bleedings, sweating and purging were still very common treatment methods. However, there was one new theory about transference. This theory suggested the disease can be transferred from one thing to another. A common belief at the time was that if you rubbed an object like a vegetable on a boil or wart, etc., the disease or illness would transfer from the body to the vegetable. The use of herbal remedies was also still very common. In fact, these herbal remedies were actually usually more reliable, as new remedies were being created during the Renaissance from other countries and slowly being introduced in England. Treatments for things like greatpox and dysentery were slowly introduced. The introduction of chemical cures was brought on by the popularization of alchemy. The College of Physicians released a book containing over 2,000 remedies, and of these 2,000 remedies, at least 122 of them were chemical remedies. Antimony was commonly used, however it was also very poisonous if it was not prepared correctly. The next thing we will be looking at is the changes and continuity in regard to the prevention of disease and illness. As with the last period, the advice that was most commonly given to prevent disease and illness was to get as far away from it as possible. If a baby was born small, that would also play a role in what was suggested to treat illness and disease. The theory was that if you were born small, you must have been weak, which would make you more susceptible to disease that would kill you in adulthood. It was still very common to be told not to eat too much, and also make sure your home and person were clean and smelling as pleasant as possible to keep away miasma. One thing that did change was people's attitude towards bathing. Bathing became less popular in this period with the increase in syphilis. People believed that syphilis was spread through the bathhouses, but this was probably because a lot of bathhouses also functioned as brothels. Henry VIII had to actually shut all of the bathhouses in the early 16th century. People now used cloths to clean themselves and just changed their clothing on a regular basis to prevent miasma and dirt. Weather patterns were also frequently used to try to link disease and illness to different types of weather and times of year. The next thing we will be looking at is the medical profession. Physicians' education was practically the exact same as in the previous period. The only real change was some curriculum changes with the introduction of chemical remedies, as mentioned previously. The practical element for physicians didn't really change much either, although dissections were now legal, so a couple of universities had access to corpses to dissect. But because the physician's role was more vocal than practical, many universities didn't see the point in training them about the human anatomy. The printing press, which was looked at in a previous video, did help physicians at this time, though, as it made accessing medical books much easier. Apothecaries still were in charge of mixing remedies, but there was more of a hierarchy to this system now, and the introduction of journeymen apprenticeships helped promote more experienced apothecaries and made the role more professional. This apprenticeship also applied to surgeons, so at the end of the apprenticeship they could become master of surgery or an apothecary. These roles added more education needed and included gaining a license to actually practice the profession. This was mainly due to the introduction of new medical instruments, but also wars that were happening at the time led to the need for more surgeries and also more serious surgeries. The last thing we're going to look at in today's video is Andreas Vesalius. He was an anatomist from the 1500s. He was very pro-dissection and pro-physicians actually doing experiments themselves. He had a very strong interest in human anatomy. He published a book in 1537 called The Six Anatomical Tables, where he held detailed diagrams of the human anatomy with multiple different translations. He also released a book in 1543 called De Humani Corporis Fabrica, which included very detailed notes on what he had found through dissections he had completed. This was arguably his most famous work. One of the biggest things Vesalius is known for is his findings in regard to Galen. He found at least 300 mistakes that Galen had made. These included things like the vena cava not leading to the liver, and men did not have fewer ribs than women, and many more. He was extremely important in the improvement of medical knowledge especially in terms of the human anatomy. This is the end of today's video. I hope you'd enjoyed it. Please subscribe, like and share this video.